This has been a most exciting month for dance enthusiasts at Iowa State. I think, as you can tell from the little handout you were handed as you came in, not only have we had the pleasure of having Mrs. Intervara on campus since the 16th, but next week the rep company from Utah will also be here and doing some very exciting things on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So if you'll all keep your programs and notice all the things going on those 3 days, so carry it home with you and please come to all those activities too. It's been most exciting for all of us to have Mrs. Intervara around campus since the 16th, working with the members of the Iowa State Dance Club. It's been a real pleasure for me. Tony and I have been friends for, I hate to admit how many years, when we both were students together in a class of Doris Humphreys at Connecticut College. Mrs. Tony Intervara is a lecturer, teacher, dancer, writer, and Laban notator. This, I know, is a strange word to some of you, but you will be hearing more about this exciting way to notate dances. She is now residing with her husband, who is a musician, and her 7-year-old son, who also plays the violin, and they're residing in Carbondale, Illinois, where Mrs. Intervara is a visiting lecturer at Southern Illinois University, also director of the Creative Dance Workshop, a modern repertory company, and a ballet repertory company. She has been most generous with her time and talent with her week at Iowa State. She did a radio program, a television program, lectured for 2 of my classes, have notated the opening number that we did in Barchet last February, Opus 24, so we'll have all this preserved, so maybe in 50 years someone could dance this dance and present it to the future Iowa State audiences and say this dance was done 50 years ago. Working with the students from last Thursday, she worked with them Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and you will see the results of this endeavor tonight. So it's with the greatest pleasure that I present to you Mrs. Tony Intervara.
We shall open this evening's lecture dance program with a showing of the dance shakers in leotards and tights and with drum and counting, as we have worked on it for the past week. Then I shall take some of the sequences that make up the dance drama and show them to you. This opening will then allow you to have the rare opportunity to see a dance more than once in one evening, and will let you think about it as I talk. Then we close the program with the shakers in full costumes with lights and music. You will begin to have the spirit of the Shaker religious sect that must have inspired Doris Humphrey in the 30s to choreograph this dance. Here then is the cast in their roles for the Shakers. Sister Jan Thunak and Brother Dwayne Boggs. Sister Debbie Kirk and Brother Sam Leong. Sister Chris Jensen and Brother Archie Hall. Sister Jan Fees and Brother Howie Coon. Sister Jody Kennard and Brother Ron Ruby. Sister Nancy Moses and the eldest Phyllis Lefty. Evelyn Jensen will be at the reed organ and will be our singer when we present the full production with music and lights. You will notice down the center of the stage a line. This line is the line that says the men may not cross over nor the women cross over. We first will do the entire production, as I said, with drum and with counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 2, 7, 8. 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 2, 3, 4. 10, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 11 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, 7 and 8 and 12 and 2 and 3, 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and can better see and understand what you see, we will take little pieces of it and show you what the choreographer had in mind at the time she did it. Dwayne will show you the beginning, the vision. When you open the curtains as though they have just seen a vision. And this is set. All right, everyone take your places for the beginning. The gentle sway, you will notice, goes from one side to the other and increases in frenzy. With the gentle beginning that opens, then leads into frenzy, and final back down to the peaceful amen. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we'll see the wrestling with the devil. The first one is done by a single man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And a little further on, at phrase H, we'll see it doubled in time, and also 2 men do it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. All right, the first brother and sister have an inner conflict of the awareness of each other, and the eldest brings this to the group's attention, this transgression across the line. 12, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, now we will all go to the center line. A little farther on, there up the center line, you see 2 files, and then on one side, the ladies on the other, and the elders up the center. And from this, you see them going to the pinwheels, over the thing that turns around to the side, where you note the humanness of desire, man to woman, and then the pulling back of self to God. Ready? And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, 8 and 9, 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and. All right. Now we'll have Nancy Moses demonstrate the various walks. Again, if you're not familiar with dance, you don't see these little subtleties that make this kind of work. You probably felt some strange sort of bobbing up and down and such. You didn't sense the weight and so forth and how it was carried. The first one shall show you what's called the falling walk. And 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. All right, now she'll show you the heavy trod that is used as they have a procession to go up the center aisle. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and now the into the earth sort of walk that's involved in the pinwheel you just saw. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Thank you. All right, the elders, Phyllis Lepke and Ron Ruby, will show us the shaping of the sins into the earth and the uplifting for help from God. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and. Now we'll ask Archie Hall and Jan Steve to join them in showing you just after the 9-count phrase, which is a famous 9-count phrase of Doris Humphrey, and the 10-count. I feel the 9-count phrase shows the person pulling himself into meditation as he sort of boxes himself in, and then out into the world, shaking sin into the earth, and then again reaching out for help, pulling himself back in. The 10-count phrase shows, again, the desire, man for woman, and the pulling back to self. The looking across the line, knowing you daren't go across. All right, the 9-count. Ready? And 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, and 8, and 9, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, and 8, and 9, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, will feel is dynamic drama so universal that it is timeless. I will now talk with you about the religious sect, the Shakers, about the choreographer, Doris Humphrey, about the dance, Shakers, and about the method of recording this dance, Laban notation. Who were these Shakers and whence came they? This religious sect originated about 1747 among a group of English Quakers who had been strongly influenced by a remnant of the French prophets or commissars, who under persecution had fled France to the British Isles. Among this group, who worshipped in Manchester, England, there arose a young woman, Anne Lee. She was the daughter of a blacksmith, wholly illiterate, for there were no schools for the poor in England in her day, but possessing such an honest and consuming desire to know God and to do his will, she soon developed a great spiritual power and insight, and was accepted as a second embodiment of the Christ upon earth by the shaking Quakers. Her followers henceforth called her Mother Ann. It was in the closing years of the American Revolution, when at times it seemed as if almost nothing had been accomplished by 5 years of sacrifice, bloodshed, and broken homes, that a religious revival broke forth on the New England frontier. Hundreds of war-weary souls were seeking a solution, were looking for salvation. Then word reached them that in the wilderness above Albany dwelt a strange little band of believers who were attempting to reestablish the early Christian church. They lived by the golden rule and patterned their lives wholly upon that of Jesus Christ, living celibate lives, sharing all they possessed, and being complete pacifists. Thousands of converts soon joined the ranks of the believers in Christ's second appearing, or Shakers. Here into the common coffers of the communities, each convert poured whatever he possessed: a feather bed, a yoke of oxen, a fine farm, or a couple of hens, whatever constituted his worldly possessions after his debts were paid. In the 11 Shaker communities, or model democracies, that had been formed where many hands united, their village streets were soon lined with buildings of excellent architecture equipped with furniture of their own making, designed for utility and durability. Their fields were vast and well cultivated, and their orchards and vineyards soon stretched off at great distances. Well-tilled vegetable and herb gardens skirted each kitchen, where substantial meals for 100 brethren and sisters were prepared thrice daily. Thus they became inventors and produced countless gadgets, tools, and machinery to increase their efficiency and production. They invented a rotary harrow, a threshing machine, a fertilizer spreader, a split-cutting machine for the manufacture of baskets and boxes. They seldom applied for patents on their inventions, for they considered such restrictions as smacking of monopoly, which was contrary, of course, to the golden rule. The Shakers were also skilled horticulturists, developing new and better species of apples, plums, and peaches. Moreover, they conducted the first nurseries in their localities, raising, packaging, and distributing seeds in America. They were the first large-scale production of kitchen and medicinal herbs. They improved their flocks and herbs by importing and breeding thoroughbred stock. They observed high standards of sanitation in their vast barns and dairies. Moreover, the believers applied most scientific methods in their cooking. Again, the Shakers recorded the works of their hands and left us definite information on cookery in a day when books on the art of cooking were few. The Western Shaker Society served thousands of meals to the hosts of Easterners who migrated west by the hundreds. The Shaker Societies were the orphanages of the day, and one might say they were the forerunner of the domestic science training schools of a later period, for every girl raised by the order received along with her book learning a thorough education in housewifery. They were pioneers in the canning industry. Their great kitchens were built for communal living and were equipped with conveniences often years ahead of their times: running water, stone sinks, specially built ranges and ovens, such as the revolving pie oven at Canterbury, planned so that the heat was evenly distributed and the baked loaves and confections could most easily be removed by rotating the oven shelves. Cleanliness was almost a part of the Shaker creed. Like Shaker architecture, furniture, and dress, the cooking expressed genuine simplicity and good quality. But it was the exalted worship of the people, however, more than any other aspect of the Shaker faith, that aroused the curiosity of the world. This was so strangely rhapsodic, so hypnotic in its effect, that the people who flocked near Albany, New York, in ever greater numbers, could ascribe it only to transcendental causes and accept it as evidence that the kingdom of God was truly at hand. The earliest account of a meeting by one Valentine Rathbun in 1780 portrayed indeed a remarkable scene, and I quote, "Everyone acts for himself, and almost everyone different from the other. One will stand with his arms extended, acting over odd postures, which they call signs. Another will be dancing, and sometimes hopping on one leg across the floor. Another will fall to turning around so swift that if it be a woman, her clothes will be filled with the wind, as though they were kept out by a hoop. Another will be prostrate on the floor, some trembling extremely, others acting as though all their nerves were convulsed, others swinging their arms with all vigor as though they were turning a wheel. They have several such experiences in a day, especially on the Sabbath." End of quotation. With the organization of singing classes, the adoption of letter musical notation, and the appearance of unharmonized manuscript hymnals, in the early 1820s, renewed interest in song and its coordination with dancing became evident. Dancing as a deliberate and purposeful art, it will be noted, was a gradual development. The odd postures and random bizarre exercises of the first meetings were involuntary acts, acceptable gifts of God, many of which indeed entered into the traditional ritualism. But as the time went on, and in part perhaps because the Shakers danced before an audience, there dawned a consciousness of purpose, and with it a tendency to rationalize and justify as well as to elaborate the gifts. Thus, according to the book writers, the early gifts, being mortifying in character, taught humility and aided in purifying the soul. When a believer trembled, he was shaking off doubts or keeping down the life of the flesh. The holy laws, hitherto an oral or secret code, were now written down for the protection of all, and they required the believers, among other injunctions, to, quote, "retire to their rooms in silence for the space of half an hour, and labor for a sense of the gospel before meeting, to sit erect in straight ranks in retiring time, and attend to the reading of the hymn or the anthem that is to be sung in the meeting, by the order of God not to present themselves to worship him when under the condemnation of sin unconfessed, but to present themselves to worship with clean hands and pure heart and justified conscience, to go into meeting in the fear of God, walking upon the toes, two abreast, keeping step together." End of quote. An analogy may be drawn between the worship of the Shakers and their handicraft. In the beginning, workmanship was somewhat crude, consisting of experimental attempts to achieve forms, satisfying to the communal mind and conscience. Eventually, a specific type of furniture and architecture emerged, pure in line, rightly proportioned, suited in every way to the needs of the order. But though Shaker design was the acme of simplicity and free of all superfluidity and dress, it was yet possible to create endless combinations and variations of the elements of which it was composed. So in the dance. The steps were made more graceful, postures were refined, and the original linear and circular movements developed into finished, precise maneuvers. The element of inner conflict, the inevitable attribute of a religious culture, also influenced the ritual. The life of the believers was a war between flesh and spirit, a struggle to suppress or sublimate desire and normal instincts. The code of separation alienated them from kith and kin. The principle of celibacy parted the sexes. Social and worldly intercourse was carefully controlled. Humility, plainness in dress and speech, consecrated labor, doctrinal meditation, the submergence of self for the common good, all were cardinal virtues. And though the worshipers could find spiritual recreation and release in the songs and dances, though the urge to break through the prescribed manners and frolic, embrace and dance alone was often irresistible, even those tendencies were affected by ingrained habits of order and obedience. The effect of such opposition of forces was to imbue the exercises of worship with a quality of tension, unpredictability, and meanings partly veiled. The dance was a virginal expression, but not without dynamic physical character. Now, Doris Humphrey, the choreographer, and one of our great pioneers of modern dance. This is a small bit on her life as it pertains to the particular dance we are doing tonight, the Shakers. As a dance artist, Doris Humphrey was second to none. As a choreographer, she is and was and probably will be first of all. During her lifetime, she composed over 100 dances of notable fame, and probably that many and more that never went beyond the studio. Doris Humphrey's work was of social criticism and exaltation of the human spirit. She was a student of the Dennis Shawn School in her youth and then broke away to form a company with Charles Weidman. Doris was born in 1895 and died in 1958. Both Miss Tolman, head of your dance section here, and I were indeed fortunate to be numbered among those in Miss Humphrey's composition classes in the early 50s. The young Doris was an incipient humanist and a thinker. She thought her way through everything in group terms. She went back to the primitive communal dances, tracing the development from circular rituals, the rank and file, the flowing line, the processional. The solo was never a vehicle for an artist, but a part of the group expression. Her grandfathers were congregational clergymen, and she is a descendant of Elder Brewster and Ralph Waldo Emerson. She grew up in dance and in music in Oak Park, Illinois, where she was born. Her father was a photographer, her mother a pianist. Thus, her mastery of many forms prepared her for the discovery of new forms. Her acquaintance with international dance culture led her home to the source of her native dance. In her research to find a fundamental expression of the human spirit, she discovered three elements of dance: design, made by changing positions in space; rhythm or accents, occurring at definite intervals; dynamics or varying degrees of tension; plus a fourth element, emotion or drama. But in general, as she composed, she felt idea was the source of movement, not movement of idea. It was a fitting close to her life to finish the book called The Art of Making Dance, the book needed for the craft of teaching composition. A complete lecture of some 3 to 4 hours could be interestingly given on Doris Humphrey, the dancer, the choreographer, the teacher. This is not for tonight, but I would like to add one point in connection with the notation of the Shakers. For years, Doris herself worked on a system of notation that could be unrolled on a mechanism having the effects of motion picture screen. The dance unfolded as the screen unrolled, and the dancers could follow it as they danced. It was never developed, and Doris used Laban notation exclusively to record her works and saw its value as she brought her great pieces to repertory to students at Connecticut College. Perhaps that is the reason she is the one choreographer with the most compositions on record to date. We can actually see from the written score how she composed. In the same manner, the musician can see how a piece of music was made hundreds of years ago. And thus it is tonight you can see a dance restored from the 1930s. You have heard about the Shakers as a religious sect, about Doris Humphrey, the choreographer of the Shakers as a dance, and now I will tell you a bit about the dance itself. Margaret Lloyd, in her book called The Borzia Book of Modern Dance, had this to say at the time the dance was performed. Her first masterwork was produced during the second season of the Dance Repertory Theater in 1931, called The Dance of the Chosen. It is now called The Shakers and became a living classic. It was based on the religious attitude of the Shaker sect and their belief in literally shaking off their sins.
Behavior in oculist meeting houses. The men and women divide into separate groups of celibacy on either side of a rectangular floor plan. The intimation of sex repression beneath the religious frenzy distressed some observers at the time.
They found the work too neurotic for their taste. But the abandon could be counted in measures. The impression of a spontaneous crescendo of fervor came through the ordered thematic development. The calm, clear-eyed Doris of the cool intellect and logical reasoning power is always at the helm of the composition. What the heart knows is well tempered by what the head commands for the purpose of form, restraint, and clarity. She never goes off the deep end. And when sex is a conspicuous factor in the experience she is presenting, She handles it with care and not with a capital letter. The design of the shakers was wrought of small quiverings and tremblings that increased in violent shakings and twistings of the whole body, of running half-falls, the forward or backward thrust of the supporting leg keeping the body in a constant state of off-balance. Never lost, of single wild jumps into the air, brief ebbs in the action allowing for the descent of the Holy Spirit, replenish the communicants for an even more vigorous declamation of fiery faith, expressed partially in words. At the end, the men kneeling on one side, the women on the other, encircling the leader, their vibrating palms held high in ecstasy. Doris, her wide skirts swirling in emphasis of the circular pattern, her face alight, her arms and hands outspread, was indeed a radiant figure. The white of her fichu and headdress, of the other women's bonnets, against the severe dark garments, contributed a striking pictorial effect to a dance of outward brilliance and inward grace. Winthrop Palmer, in Theatrical Dancing in America in 1945, had this to say about the Shakers. For American, a Broadway review produced by Lee Shubert and directed by J.P. McAvoy, Doris Humphrey revived a composition created in 1928 entitled The Dance of the Chosen. Based on the theory of dancing one's sins away, Dance of the Chosen was renamed The Shakers. The following was on the program, and I quote, "God hath revealed that eternal life shall be the reward of the chosen few who are shaken clean of sin." The dance represents the Shaker sect at meeting and is a study of religious ecstasy. The voice, drum, and accordion accompaniment were arranged for the dance after it has been created. It is the first dance of its kind to be based on an American religious theme. It is worth noting that this work contains some of the most violent, rebellious, and mad movement Doris Humphrey has created. It is altogether the opposite of her usually exquisite flowing style or delicate satirical pantomime. It interprets the emotion of an Anglo-Saxon religious sect, of a group of men and women dedicated to the principles of celibacy and communism, and to the dual character of God, man and woman. With the same mad fury other so-called modern dancers used in developing and demonstrating themes of social consciousness. Miss Humphrey's fine sense of humor may be suggesting that social consciousness expressed by violent movement in an unconscious revelation of emotional ecstasies neglected by American education and the religion of John Calvin. And from Doris Humphrey herself, in her one and only book, The Art of Making Dances, says, "Sometimes the whole weight of the dance was on the shoulders of the group. Individuals were comparatively unimportant, acting more as a focus and as a contrast than as kings and queens worshipped by their subjects. Many early modern dancers could be cited as examples of this new attitude to people and therefore to choreography. One of them was my composition, The Shakers, done about 1931, in which the ensemble was dominant. There was a central figure, yes, but by far the strongest and most important movement was given to the group, and it was their collective strength which gave power to the dance. Endings or climaxes are equally effective and equally dependent on the word for a specific meeting. An example of this is in my dance, The Shakers, when at the peak of a crescendo of movement, a voice seems to burst spontaneously from one dancer, as though the press of feeling could no longer be contained in the dance medium. The words say specific things about the ecstatic state. Lastly, we come to the recording of the dance Shakers. The method, Laban notation. Laban notation is movement writing. In 1954, Rudolf von Laban wrote, "It is obvious that notation or script facilitates the communication of movement ideas to other people. When, ages ago, mankind awoke to the idea of standardizing pictures and signs in order to communicate certain ideas to one another, bodily actions and gestures were of course included from the very beginning. Early forms of writing are full of signs or symbols for action and moving. In my search for primary action signs, I found fascinating examples of movement description in the mantic symbols invented by the ancient monks of Tibet and the cuneiform characters of the Assyrians and Babylonians. In Egyptian and in Chinese scripts, I found a rich variety of movement symbols, which are, in a sense, the archetypes of dance notation signs, End of quote. Until recently, dance alone of all the arts was at the mercy of human memory. Dance patterns were passed down through the generations by other dancers or choreographers who had seen the work performed and had trained their memories to capture the infinite detail of the choreography. As I so often say, from mouth to foot and foot to mouth. Thus few works survived intact. Even famous choreographers have been known to forget details of their own works after they have been out of repertory for several seasons. Nevertheless, simple dance notation is really a long history. Dancing figures were drawn on cave walls during the Stone Age, but most dance historians agree that the first really nuanced notation was made in 1700 by Raoul Fourier, who traced the floor patterns of dancers and utilized symbols to indicate their steps. Many other systems were invented in the 19th century, when the modern ballet really came into being, and through the 20th century, some using stick figures appended to musical scores to indicate timing and other variations. In this country, however, and increasingly throughout the world, the most widely used system is that of Laban notation, developed in the 1920s by Rudolf von Laban. The system is based on scientific principles of movement. Now, if I had a blackboard, I would show you on the blackboard, but I'm sure visually you can see me as I either talk or trace through the air some of the things that make up the Laban notation method of recording movement. I usually liken it to music because I think even though we cannot read music, we are familiar with the 5-line staff that travels from left to right. The dance notation staff is a 3-line staff moving from bottom to top of a written page. Also, we are all familiar with how the music staff divides its staff by bar lines. The notation staff does the same, only of course the bar lines run across the vertical staff. The symbol for music notation, as we all know, is the egg shape. For the dance notation, it is a rectangle, a simple rectangle. And as with the egg shape, the musician does many, many things, shading it in, putting dots after it, adding stems, flags. The notation rectangle can have the same thing done to it. By its length, you can denote the time of a movement. By its shading, you can denote the level. If the rectangle is all blacked in, it means low level. If you're standing, that means you are lowered with bent knees. If the rectangle has a single dot in the middle, it means you are at middle level or as though you were walking. If it is striped in, it means you are at high level, and in this case, since we seem to be taking a walking pattern, you'd be moving on the balls of your feet. Direction is given by pointers. I think we are most familiar with the arrow as we travel down the highways. If it points up, we go forward. So therefore the dance notation puts a forward pointer, or on the page it's one on top of the page. If you are going back, you have the pointer at the bottom of the page. I think very easily you can see by putting a pointer to the side, you would indicate going to your right, or to the other side to your left. Likewise, you can make pointers that will show the diagonals. In this case, going toward the down right diagonal, down left diagonal, turning the other way around, back left and back right diagonals. Then by its placement on the staff, you can tell what part of the body moves. The staff has a center line. Everything to this side is to your right, everything to this side of the center line is to your left. So on either side of the center line, you have the supports. At the present time, were I to record you, I would show you sitting on your seats. If I were recording what I'm doing, the support would be my feet. Second column out would be the gesturing leg. That means whatever the leg whose weight is free, not attached to the ground, is moving. You can't see my leg, I'm sure, but it's moving up here. The third column out on either side denotes the body, the torso, all the things that it can do. The fourth column out on either side denotes the arms. In this case, as you're looking at me, my arms are extended at the level of my shoulder, which would be side middle. If I lifted them between straight above my head, and at the side I would have side high. And if I go conversely beyond my waist, I'd be having side low to the side. The fifth column out on either side would be for the hands, and of course this is rather important, especially in recording of mudras, the Indian dance. And then lastly, on the right-hand side, we have a column for the head. I feel a little story, be it legend or fact, should be brought in about how Rudolf von Laban needed to discover a method of recording. I think all of us know that necessity is the mother of invention. Well, it was no different to him than to the rest of us. It seems that he was in charge of the great festivals of dance in Europe, and one of his dreams each year was to have a masked dance of all present. He found it very difficult to have the dance learned the way he wished it from word notes, so he plodded and plotted to find a graphic way, and the result was the beginning of his kinetography, or his script writing, which here in America we nicely call after him, Laban notation. At any rate, I have found during the last 20 years I have been lecturing on the notation system that by the time I have finished the lecture, those present can at least follow the walking patterns, and that it is what I hope of you. And if that were the prime issue tonight, we would have a large blackboard to show you the fundamentals, and also have duplicated sheets upon which could be written folk dances, or just plain locomotor patterns, or social dances, and you will be able to work from the written page. Just as you are literate in the written word for communicative language, and the musical notation for musical sounds. Now, what form does this notation take? We have the structured writing, which is the most exact movement, which is the exact movement that is happening from the smallest wink or smile to the greatest hurdle that can be executed. We have the motif writing, which is the indication of movement made from any action into a given direction to a turn, the main purpose being that of a general idea, very much as the motif writing in music. We have the effort shape writing, which can give us the dynamics and quality needed for recording whatever is done. And the function of Laban notation, my belief, as I have gone everywhere to sell this wonder, is that it is a tool for teaching, learning, performing. Tonight's work would not have been possible without Laban notation. It was recorded during the lifetime of the choreographer, and thus it is preserved for all time accurately. In my work at Southern Illinois University, I have adapted this system to record the courtship dances of the Zycobolus or jumping spider, and the courtship dances of the albatross or goonie bird. And to the scientist, this is one way to further and better describe animal behavior and movement. As a commissioned notator, I've had the pleasure of making a wee bite into the preservation of our Ameri Indian culture when I notated a few of the Plains Indian dances. As notator for Miriam Gray of Illinois State University, I notated the folk dance class taught there with the hope of publication of a pamphlet to aid the secondary teacher in folk dance in the state. Laban notation has been used in industry to discover time-saving movements of workers. It has been used in correctives in sports. It has been used in psychiatric therapy in New York, where the movement of the patient is recorded as the doctor is having his talk sessions. Also, I am working as an educator on a series of ballet cards on the various systems of ballet now taught throughout the world, before they become so amalgamated that they lose their identity. 3 grades of the Cecchetti are finished, with the 4th on the printing table. The Royal Academy of Dance syllabus that Margot Fontaine fostered is in a form ready for drawing and checking. That leaves still the Bournonville and the Russian. In this country, the notation of scores is carried out under the direction of the Dance Notation Bureau in New York, which acts as a clearinghouse. It has branches in Britain, Israel, and Australia, and individual contacts throughout the world. The Bureau has already notated more than 100 dances, including works by Balanchine, Tudor, Robin, Humphrey, Limon, Ivanov, and Ashton. But the demand outraces the supply, and there are hundreds of smaller pieces on record. Probably I should note that there are about 50 of us in the world, and that's not very many to do the gigantic task that faces us. There is one more advantage that may mean more to the future of Laban notation than its intrinsic value as a language of dance. It is the only system that can be copyrighted and thus protect the choreographer's work while providing for his estate. And now, because of the Shakers, Doris Humphrey, and Laba Notation, we present the dance Shakers.